Vietnam.
And they made it on!
A deadly dogfight rages high above the jungle.
All hell's breaking loose.
Okay, where is he? He's on his six, he's on his butts!
It's assholes and elbows in the cockpit.
Break right, do your
It's just absolutely terrifying.
The U.S. Air Force is getting hammered by an enemy that fights by its own rules.
If we let this war get out of hand, we're going to have World War III.
America needs a hero. Someone willing to break every rule in the book to crush the enemy.
This guy, Robin Olds, was the real thing.
A battle-hardened pilot with the right stuff. A maverick who dreams up the most audacious airborne mission of the Vietnam War.
It's suicide.
July 1966.
Copy that, green light to go.
The conflict in Vietnam is exploding into full-blown war. Despite its vastly superior air force, American bombers are being shot out of the sky by the North Vietnamese, outsmarting U.S. pilots with their hit-and-run guerrilla tactics. Casualties are high, morale is low. Ralph Wetterhahn, a 24-year-old lieutenant from New York, finds himself thrown into the chaos and terror of the war in the skies over Vietnam.
In August of 1966, I landed at Ubon Air Base in Thailand. It's hot and steamy in the summer there. You check in, the food is strange, the water tastes awful, the mosquitoes drive you nuts. There's a lot of things going on, and people are getting killed.
In July alone, dozens of U.S. pilots are shot down.
The wing was in a state of turmoil like you wouldn't believe. We were losing pilots on a daily basis. The aircraft were in terrible condition mechanically, and the missions were brutal. So that's what we're faced with at the end of August and into September of 1966, at which point in comes this Colonel Robin Olds.
Colonel Robin Olds is an old-school hero. Charismatic, revered, fearless.
He was an all-American football star out of West Point. He was married to a movie star, Ella Raines, and he had these Clark Gable good looks. It was like a movie actor.
Olds leaves a comfortable job as a commander in England for the blood and sweat of the front line.
He was on the list to become a general, a one-star general, and he knew one-star generals don't get to fly. They just keep them at desks, they keep them in administrative positions, and they're not allowed to fly. And he thought, hell no, that's not going to be me, I want to fly. Robin Olds was not designed to sit behind a desk. Number one, he was too big, and number two, he couldn't fly the damn desk.
His mission, to figure out why so many pilots are dying and help a demoralized and beaten down 8th Wing return to supremacy.
When Olds comes in to take command of the 8th, he's 44 years old. He's got more than a decade, almost 2 decades on some of his airmen.
Excuse me. I don't believe I knew anything about him, or had ever heard of Robin Olds.
J.B. Stone, a young pilot from Mississippi, is stationed in Thailand.
Nobody knew it was coming.
What the hell kind of operation are you running here?
He's really pissed. I said, what kind of outfit is this?
Olds knows if he's going to resurrect this broken fighter wing, he's got to earn his pilot's respect.
And here he shows up at our doorstep to take over the wing.
And I'm your new CO.
And we're all sitting back there saying, you'll be just like the other ones. You'll fly 2 missions and we'll never see you again.
He said, I don't know what you guys are doing over here,
I don't know what you've been doing.
but I'm gonna find out.
I'm gonna fly Green 16.
Green 16 is just a junior ranking brown bar second lieutenant that's hanging on for dear life. And he waved that finger around the room and said, and at the end of that time, I'm gonna be better than all of you.
Yeah, we'll see.
And I didn't mean to say it out loud, but somehow it snuck out. He just drilled holes in my head with those eyes. And I'm sitting there saying, I wish I hadn't have said that, you know? And finally, just a little crack of a smile broke.
What's your name, son?
Captain John Stone, sir.
Green 16 starts 0300 tomorrow.
The last time Robin Olds flew into battle, it was in a World War II prop plane. Now he takes a crash course in flying the U.S. Air Force's most modern flying machine, the F-4 Phantom.
Colonel Olds certainly didn't keep his distance from the guys.
Everett Raspberry, a pilot in his 30s from Georgia, remembers his new boss well.
I think he led by example. If he couldn't do it, he wasn't going to ask anybody else to do it.
2 or 3 weeks, he's out front on the pointy end, leading. And he was doing better than anybody in that room.
Soon after landing in Thailand, Olds is leading his men, escorting bombing missions over North Vietnam. He needs to find out what's going wrong firsthand.
He's taking chances. He's leading these missions. We hadn't seen that. We hadn't seen that. This guy, Robin Olds, was the real thing.
Olds is the real thing because flying is in his DNA.
My dad's mother died when he was 4 years old, and he was basically raised by his father, who was a brilliant pilot in World War I. So he grew up surrounded by fighter pilots of his dad's era. Eddie Rickenbacker, Elliott White Springs, Tui Spots, the greats of World War I. There just was no doubt in his mind that he wanted to be a fighter pilot.
In 1943, Olds graduates from West Point and joins the fight against Hitler in Europe. Age 22, he joins an exclusive club.
Robin became the first ace of his group in England. His total at the end of the war was 12 aerial kills. "21 years later, now in the cockpit of a supersonic jet fighter, Robin Olds is about to lead his men in the gutsiest aerial mission of the Vietnam War.
Performance, 2 minutes up, closing from behind.
Veteran pilot Robin Olds has been sent to Vietnam to light a fire under the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. Their main job, to protect high-speed Thunder Chief bombers known as Thuds, who are getting slaughtered by the North Vietnamese Air Force, who exploit small weaknesses in American tactics with devastating results.
The U.S. loses 43 aircraft in July of '66. This is an astronomical amount, and the toll it takes on the pilots is considerable.
It's definitely, excuse me, it's a big impact. Everybody goes to the club and gets shit-faced. Talk about the guy. And then you gotta go back tomorrow.
You start questioning the numbers. Am I gonna survive all this? We're losing about 1 a day. Do the math, you know? You're not gonna make it unless something changes.
In part, the high casualty rates are due to an escalation in the air war, all part of Operation Rolling Thunder.
Operation Rolling Thunder is the code name for the missions over North Vietnam. It involves heavy bombing of the transportation facilities, bridges, railroads, oil storage.
The objective, to destroy the supply chain that supports Viet Cong fighters in the South and force the North Vietnamese to the negotiating table.
We're going to hit them, and we're going to hit them, and we're going to hit them, and eventually they're going to say, "Uncle, we give up."
Instead of crying, "Uncle," the North Vietnamese fight back.
The North Vietnamese were a very formidable enemy for the United States. They used tactics that exploit American weaknesses.
One major weakness is the predictability of American bombing raids.
Typical bombing runs would have 20 to 30 F-105s and about the same number of F-4s. And there'd be 4 105s and then 4 F-4s, et cetera, go all the way back. They would hit target areas in the morning, and then we'd do it again in the afternoon. That was one of the other problems. The Vietnamese could set their watches by what we were doing.
They certainly had the advantage because they were getting specific control from the ground radar flight controllers about where the American airplanes are.
The North Vietnamese Air Force strategy is simple: hit and run.
They were like a pack of wolves. They would circle waiting for the strike force to come over or come close.
Shotgun, this is Red Crown. They got your 7. That's amazing.
Then they would send 1 or 2 MiGs into that mass of airplanes, launch a missile, and hopefully hit one of them.
Shotgun lead, he's closing. Reverse your blade.
The Thud was very fast, but when you put a lot of bombs on it, it wouldn't maneuver.
So against a MiG-21 or a MiG-17, there was no contest. The MiGs were going to win.
So the pilot is forced to jettison his bomb load. This is as good as gold for the North Vietnamese, because what you've done is you've forced the Americans to abandon their mission.
Fort Adams turns in from behind.
When Olds and his F-4s show up, the MiGs vanish rather than risk their precious planes in a dogfight.
Dropping off. We're heading inbound.
The obvious solution for Olds is to destroy airfields in North Vietnam, but his hands are firmly tied.
We were not allowed to bomb airfields, shipping in Haiphong Harbor, because if we hit the Soviets and the Chinese, both of whom are supporting the North Vietnamese, we're going to have World War III.
So this is a catch-22 situation for Olds and his airmen. You see your enemy there, and you cannot destroy him. They're fighting this with one hand tied behind their back. This is incredibly frustrating. They're getting shot at, and there's nothing they can do.
They have no idea what we're going through up here. Bunch of bureaucracy.
The war was run in Washington, you know, what, 10 or 12,000 miles away, you know? And that was a sticking point with the fighter pilots, you know? What do they know, you know? Let us just go do what we want to do.
LBJ is quoted as saying, "They don't bomb an outhouse without my approval."
Thanks, Sarah.
Strict rules of engagement put Olds and his men in a dangerous bind. The World War II double ace needs to think outside the box. He has no idea J.B. Stone and a small band of fellow pilots are doing exactly the same.
There are a lot of things you could do that weren't getting done. I found out we got reconnaissance delivered every day that just kind of sat around.
Write this down. 105s are safe.
It was a lot of valuable information, and you could go find it if you took the time. We'd go down there every day and just sit and smoke cigarettes and study the intelligence and read what the other flights had done. We called ourselves the Bibs, boys in the back shop.
It's not long before their commanding officer finds them.
So what we do is we're coming in.
He was wandering around one day, and he walks in.
And we just keep.
What are you doing here?
That's why we're trying to put ourselves ahead of the game, so when we go up there,
He says, we have to do something about these MiGs.
It's totally unacceptable, our losses.
I shared that, and loudmouth that I'd found myself to be at times, said, I think I have an idea.
Shotgun, this is Red Crown. They got your 7.
Roger, Red Crown. Bulldog, get him off my ass. Hang in there, buddy.
Whenever the MiG pilots attack the Thud bombers, they retreat as soon as the F-4s fly to the rescue.
Oh, we lost them.
They'd try to avoid the F-4s. And the reason being is because we could turn with them and we could shoot them down.
They didn't hang around and dogfight because they knew they would lose that.
Stone wants to turn the predictability of the bombing raids from a dangerous disadvantage to their advantage. His audacious idea, a 20th century Trojan horse. F-4 Phantoms masquerade as Thud bombers, lure the MiGs into open skies, and take them down in a dogfight. Intrigued, Robin Olds handpicks a team to flesh out the plan.
Wetterhelm, come on in.
He calls me in to his office and he says, I picked you for a number of reasons, but I want you to go down the hall. There's a little office, and you're going to find some of your buddies in there, and you're going to go ahead and plan a mission.
Get your ass down there.
Yes, sir.
Olds dubs the top-secret mission Operation Bolo.
What are you doing here?
Old sent me down. What are you guys up to? It's called Bolo.
And I couldn't believe this, you know, 2 lieutenants, a captain, and a major. We're nothing, and we're going to plan this thing? And it's a big deal. It's not just going to shoot down a few airplanes. This is going to wipe out the North Vietnamese Air Force if we pull it off. That was huge, you know, to think that someone would entrust you with that.
Challenge number 1. Trick the North Vietnamese into thinking F-4 Phantoms are F-105 Thud bombers.
The F-105s coming out of Thailand are going to be flying at a specific altitude on specific routes. They're going to be refueling in the air at a specific point, and there's very little variation, if any, on these flights. Olds and his airmen play off of this.
You're coming in at the same altitude.
We tried to mimic exactly the way that the 105s would work. Even the radio transmissions, they had certain lingo that they used, and we would use it.
Clean them up, start your music.
You got to say green them up instead of set them up hot, because in a 105, when you arm the bombs, you push some buttons and things go green.
The Thud also carries a jamming device, or ECM pod. Its purpose is to block the radar of enemy surface-to-air missiles.
We had to have those pods to make the deception work. It would make a wide blur on the radar ground controller screen. He can't see the individual target in this band.
So they were hoping that when they see this big blob of interference heading that way, that this is 105s.
We're gonna fly up the Black River.
It was all kept simple, and that was the beauty of it, and that's what we put together in that little room with Olds, tweaking it every now and then.
If the bait and switch works, it will change the course of the air war in Vietnam. It's a huge roll of the dice. The F-4s have one big disadvantage when face-to-face with one of the Cold War's deadliest fighters.
It's panic time. You know, someone's going to get killed here pretty quick.
Ubon Air Base, Thailand. Through the fall of 1966, Robin Olds and a small group of pilots honed their top-secret plan to wipe out the North Vietnamese Air Force.
Why will the MiGs engage the F-4s?
It won't be easy. Trained in Russia, the men flying the MiGs are top pilots. Not only that, the Americans face a blistering North Vietnamese ground-to-air attack from Russian and Chinese-made missiles.
North Vietnam is divided into route packages from 1 to 6.
The higher the number, the bigger the risk.
The easy packs are 1, 2, and 3. Number 6 is Hanoi. You're supposed to get 10 missions in there to learn how to keep alive. But we'd lost so many pilots and nobody got 10. You get 6, 7, sometimes 3 before you're headed for Hanoi.
You never got comfortable in going to Pack 6. It was always the butterflies, because you never knew what was going to happen. That area around Hanoi was the most heavily defended area in the world. It had the deadly combination of everything from rice farmers with rifles and slingshots, all the way up to radar-guided AAA surface-to-air missiles.
We assumed those guys are going to lose somebody, minimum one.
With all the intelligence?
So we asked Olds, you know, which flight are we going to be in? And he said, I ain't telling you till it's time.
It's Old's way of making sure his pilots show neither fear nor favor while planning an operation that may be their last.
He left, and Stone turned to us and said, I'll never forget this. He said, we got to plan it like you're going to ride that train. When you plan a mission and you know you're going to fly that mission, you approach it with a whole different attitude. You're very careful. How many can we afford to put in there if we're going to lose somebody on each flight? How many airplanes did the North Vietnamese put up? How are we going to get all the airplanes off the runway? So that's the kind of detail we went into on every single flight that we did, and it was a huge undertaking.
Despite its awesome firepower, the F-4 Phantom is outclassed by the nimble MiG in close combat.
The F-4 Phantom was an airplane pushed into a war for which it was not designed.
Over the late 50s into the early 1960s, it was viewed that combat was not going to be dogfighting as it had been in previous wars. The idea was fly fast, fly high, carry missiles.
Standard load for the Phantoms were 4 radar-guided missiles, 4 heat-seeking missiles, and we usually carried 7 1,000-pound bombs. Beautiful load. It would carry everything, and it would do everything. I thought it was the war machine.
The Phantom has one major design flaw.
The biggest weakness of the F-4 was no gun.
They knew that the closer they got in with us, the more we were hampered from shooting them down.
Radar missiles and heat-seeking missiles were not designed against maneuvering targets. You need to be able to get in close, you need the medium, and you need the long range. If you have the gun, the Sidewinder, and the Sparrow, you got all 3. But without that gun, you're really hurting. When we got inside of 3,000 feet, we can't fire anything that's going to hit him. We're so close that when we fire the Sidewinder, it'll go past him before the missile unlocks, and it'll miss him.
Not only are the MiGs better suited to dogfighting, Colonel Olds knows the F-4 fighter has yet another disadvantage.
You can spot an F-4 about 15 miles away.
F-4s made a heavy black contrail just from the exhaust. The 105s did not. That was a big concern of mine, that our ruse is going to be destroyed as soon as some MiG pilot gets airborne and sees the smoke trail.
And they can just curl around behind and stuff a missile up one of our tails and be on their way.
Faced with a long list of weaknesses, Olds needs to find faults in the MiGs he can exploit.
The MiG-21, we say, has very short legs, not much fuel load, so they could only fight for a short time, and then they had to go back and land.
How long can they fly? Well, the MiG-17 has about 45 minutes of fuel. The MiG-21 has about another 10 minutes or so. So about a little over an hour is all they can stay airborne.
The MiG's short legs offer Olds a chance.
If we cover their airfields for an hour, after they take off, they got no place to land.
We come in, and once
The plan is get them airborne, do not let them land, stay with them till we shot them down or they run out of fuel.
So they stagger the flights that are going in 5-minute intervals.
So we'll have 7 in total coming down.
So that is one F-4 flight is having to refuel, another flight's coming in, and then another flight.
Masquerading as Thud bombers, the Phantoms will launch from Ubon in 7 groups of 4 fighters each. With luck, the MiGs will scramble and fly into the deadly trap. If they attempt to escape towards China, they'll be boxed in by a second force flying from the east, led by World War II and Korean veteran Robert Tanguy.
We're on the east wing, out of Da Nang going up the coast. If the MiG's making a run for it, of course, we're going to close it off by coming in from the east and then shoot them down like pigeons.
On paper, the top-secret plan looks good. Now, it's up to Olds to pitch the deal and bring Operation Bolo to life.
What I thought was this ain't ever going to happen. It's too good. It's too good. They'll never approve it.
Olds travels to Saigon and heads straight to the top.
Robin Olds goes to General Momar, four-star general, ace from World War II, and says, I want to take out the North Vietnamese Air Force. And this is how I want to do it. Robin Olds was the key.
By the time the F-4s get
He had that charisma, you know, that movie star kind of thing, and he did it so well. So he comes back from Saigon.
Fellas, gave us the green light.
Boys, Stoney.
The mission is on, it's on for New Year's Day, 1st of January.
As 1966 comes to a close, Olds calls a surprise briefing to unveil Operation Bolo.
Bolo is a classic bait and switch mission.
They're thinking, you gotta be shitting me. We're gonna fly into the most heavily defended area in the world and make them think that we're thugs. What is that all about? That's suicide.
We're gonna come in 7 flights, 5 minutes apart.
Finally, Olds reveals their assignments,
Under code name.
each flight with its own unique call sign.
The F-4s out of U-Bahn were all going to be automobiles. Olds, Rambler, Ford, Vespa. If it was an animal like bear, raccoon, then you knew it was one of the Da Nang guys. So all you had to do was listen, and you knew what was going on.
I'm gonna lead the first assignment. Olds, for obvious reasons.
Leading the entire operation is Commander Robin Olds, his wingman Ralph Wetterhahn.
My role as number 2 is to look for MiGs, and when I see them, point them out to Olds so that he can shoot them, and if he can't shoot them, then I shoot them.
Vice Commander Chappie James leads the second flight, codenamed Ford. Everett Raspberry will be his wingman.
I was there to protect Chappie James.
All right, gentlemen, this is your time to shine. You will be in a battle.
All 3 of the flights, Olds, Ford, Rambler, were to end up over Phu Quien, which is the main MiG base just north of Hanoi.
The briefing room buzzes with excitement.
It was unreal, like, holy moly. This is something so totally different and so totally neat. And, you know, you're just itching to go do this. We're gonna go fight against airplanes for a change instead of, you know, getting shot at.
0 hour is set for 1300 hours on January 1st, 1967.
It's New Year's Eve, and the parties have been canceled, and we all have our assignments, and we're waiting. And around, I don't know, 8 o'clock that night, word comes the mission scrubbed because the weather's not cooperating. Weather is the key ingredient to this whole mission. If we're going to shoot down airplanes, we got to see them. If they're down beneath the cloud deck, we're not going to be able to pull it off.
The mission is reset for the following day, January 2nd. Olds uses the break in action to let his troops blow off some steam.
Robin Olds says, okay, we're going to party.
Want to see every one of you back here tomorrow night?
So, so we started partying.
Robin Olds is poised to execute a daring and risky mission. If the plan works, it'll decimate the North Vietnamese Air Force. So far, the weather hasn't cooperated. But with the thunderstorms now gone, Operation Bolo is on.
You guys are all well.
He's got that Clark Gable good look kind of thing. He's not just sitting down behind a desk and issuing orders. He's going to be with us. He's going to lead us there. It impresses you. It really is a motivating thing.
Confidence is critical. None of Olds' pilots have ever tangled in a dogfight. Olds himself hasn't been in combat since World War II, 21 years ago.
This is the most exciting mission I've encountered. We're going to do what we were trained to do, shoot down airplanes, and everybody is on top of the world.
Everybody's ready, and we show up January the 2nd, 1967. Fangs hanging out, dripping blood.
We strap in. Each click is one more closer step to getting going. The lap belt goes on. You hook up the G-suit. You get the engine started.
You're real busy checking the systems for the missiles, and you're just focused on what you've got to do in the next few minutes to make that takeoff time.
All 4 airplanes pull up and stop at what's called the arming area at the end of the runway. Then you bring both hands up and keep them visible. Once the maintenance guy knows you're not going to pickle a bomb, he runs underneath there. Every missile has a safety pin, a red flag on it. He pulls those out, and he gives you the thumbs up. We're the first to go. I'm sitting there right up behind Robin Olds, taxiing down. And then Olds releases brakes, and I see these 2 big plumes of fire coming out of the tailpipes. The heat plumes are coming up off the runway, and he lifts off. And then it's your turn. You push the power up. You feel that surge in the back of your back, and the 2 afterburners light, and you're going. All those going. It's really going to happen. And we're all thinking, unbelievable, unbelievable.
"300 miles to the east of Olds, another wing of Phantoms takes to the air led by Colonel Tanguy. They'll cut off the MiG's escape route into China.
If they did try to make a run, they'd be running into us on the east side.
Mimicking the thuds, Olds refuels at the same altitude and location before entering enemy territory.
The tankers are all up in northern Laos for us. The Da Nang people are hitting tankers in the South China Sea.
After 90 minutes, Olds' flight reaches Hanoi and its main airfields. The skies are empty. The MiGs he's expecting, nowhere to be seen.
We should be up by now.
Just dead silence, scary dead silence. This is insane what we're doing.
Do the North Vietnamese know it's a setup? Are they about to spring a trap of their own?
This is a one-time shot. If they do this and the North Vietnamese don't take the bait, they'll probably never take the bait again.
All they can do is circle, burning valuable fuel, and wait.
And we turn over Phu Quyen and we start back north. We're thinking, man, this is going to be interesting to see what happens now, because now we're spending a lot of time above here. That gives the guys on the ground time to start figuring out what they want to do. As he rolls out towards Hanoi again, that's when the first MiG pops up out of the clouds.
We got one!
And here comes this silver airplane with that MiG-21 Delta on it. It's the first time I'd seen another human being up close who's up there to kill you, okay? And you're up there to kill him. And it's a moment I will never, ever forget.
More MiG fighters burst through the clouds. The Vietnamese have taken the bait.
Hey, it's me! I gotta make a tap! I'm going for him!
Robin Olds puts his nose right at the one that I'm looking at. He's firing sidewinders in a tight turn, and there's no way those missiles can make the turn.
It's a miss!
Another MiG moves in behind Olds.
Hey, please, got a MiG on there!
He's trapped.
It's 86, it's 86!
It's panic time. He's in the worst position, sandwiched between 2 MiGs, and things are going to hell in a handbasket. What the hell do you do? You know, someone's going to get killed here pretty quick. I had to make a decision.
It's up to Wetterhahn, his wingman, to protect his leader.
I fire the first missile, and I feel it come off, but I never see it. It just fell away, I guess. So I squeeze the second time, The missile comes off, it appears just like textbook. I watch it all the way in, and the MiG, he flew for another instant, and I thought it missed him for a second. Then the missile merges with the MiG, and there's this huge explosion, and he starts tumbling.
One MiG down, Olds turns his attention to the other.
He then pulls up in this steep turn, right up into the sun. He rolls out of that thing in this gigantic barrel roll maneuver and winds up down here behind another MiG.
It's been over 20 years since his last dogfight, but Robin Olds doesn't miss a beat.
It was a knife fight, close in, hard turning, maneuvering, mano a mano.
The MiGs had to be surprised when they got up there to find that it was F-4s that they were jumping on instead of 105s. And of course, it was too late then.
As the dogfight rages on, the next wave of fighters, codenamed Ford, arrives.
Ford lead, break right. MiG at 5 o'clock.
Everett Raspberry sees his flight leader chased by a MiG.
No response, we just kept on going.
Ford lead, do you copy? Break right.
I thought maybe he didn't recognize his call sign.
Copy, break right.
I don't know what was going on up there.
I got this guy.
I got between him and the MiG. And when he saw me do that, he rolled left. So I rolled right into him. We came canopy, canopy. I could see his oxygen mask. All of aerial combat is about getting the other guy to overshoot or go past you. So I just sat there hoping that he would make a mistake. I went into a barrel roll. He reversed his turn, and that was the last mistake he made. I got the missile growling and squeezed trigger. It went just like a bullet. Blew him all to pieces.
Olds and his pilots have kicked a hornet's nest. The North Vietnamese unleash everything they've got.
We hit? We got one.
American fighter pilots have sprung a deadly trap, suckering North Vietnamese MiGs into a ferocious dogfight. J.B. Stone, in flight group codenamed Rambler, joins the action.
I look down and I see two MiGs come up through the undercast, just poof, poof, like that, close formation. Without thinking, I banked a little bit to the left to get the nose going down. I pulled the trigger for the first Sparrow. They just fell away. So I squeezed two more times. The second missile guided right to that MiG and blew up.
Stone has no time to celebrate his kill.
All hell's breaking loose.
Where did he come from?
All of a sudden, all of the MiGs they could get airborne were airborne. They're everywhere.
Second one at 2 o'clock.
It's assholes and elbows in the cockpit, and everybody's screaming. I hear, F4, I don't know your call sign, break right. It's a MiG on your ass. And there's a MiG-21. He's belly up to me. I see his red gear doors. He is shooting at me with his 30-millimeter cannon. It's shooting tracer bullets so they can see where they're aiming, but the tracers are this big around. They're bigger than basketballs, and that's all over my canopy. They're going across the top. Seemed like they're going through my canopy into my cockpit. And I thought I was hit.
We hit?
Oh, shit. But it wasn't. It was just the basketballs going across the canopy. So what I do, I break into him to destroy his tracking device. I'm in this tight turn, and we're going 560 knots, maxed out the G meter, and I get out here in reverse, and there's no MiG. He's gone.
Wising up to the trap, the North Vietnamese order a swift retreat.
The call came back from the Vietnamese controllers and said, get in the clouds. And that's what they did.
That's egress.
That's fighter pilot talk for let's get the hell out of here.
Low on fuel, all the Phantoms head for home. The dogfight is over in a matter of minutes. By the time Olds lands at Ubon in Thailand, word of the mission's historic success has already reached the ground crews.
We come in and 3 of us do the victory rolls.
Everybody was out there and the crowds were there. When we attacked Sin, I stood up in the seat. Gave it one of those.
Olds and his fighter wing have downed 7 planes, almost half the MiG-21s in the North Vietnamese Air Force, leaving the enemy in disarray for months.
It couldn't have been better. We didn't lose anybody, and we kicked some good butt up there that day.
Did everything go as you'd expected it to go during the flight?
No, we missed a few. It went beautifully, yes. I'm just terribly, terribly pleased.
Captain, this was your first MiG battle. How did it feel?
It was great. We had outstanding results, which we had planned for and hoped for. It's just a great feeling that it came off the way it did.
It was valuable far beyond just shooting down half the MiG-21 fleet of North Vietnam. It was a shot in the arm and the spirit of all the fighter pilots in Southeast Asia.
And America has a hero in the man who made it all happen, Colonel Robin Olds.
As a commander, Robin Olds was the best. Best I've known or heard tell of. He had everything that it took. Conviction, knowledge, and the courage to stand up and be counted.
Rather than returning to the safety of his desk job, Olds chooses to stay in the air.
At the time, it was supposed to be a 100-mission tour.
When you got 100, you'd be sent home. And he didn't want to be sent home. So he would go into the operations room at night and start erasing his missions off the board, so they were always around number 86 or number 87.
He's a World War II ace. He's got all the medals he needs. What's he got to prove? Nothing. That's the beauty of it. He went.
Finally, Olds' time in Vietnam is up.
He is a hero of the First Reich. He has just completed his final mission. And now, he is coming home.
Here's to the greatest wing ever.
My father told me that the proudest moment of his life was when his men carried him on their shoulders after his final mission, which was number 152.
Men of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, Colonel Robin Olds was a rather special man. A wing commander who did more than any of his pilots and usually did it better. He did not get his 5th MiG, which would have made him officially an ace, but to the men who flew with him, he already is an ace.
He returns to America and his family.
My father left Vietnam in late September of 1967, came back to Washington, D.C., and was immediately hauled into President Johnson's office. President Johnson sat him down and said, "Now, Colonel, tell me how you think this war is going." And my father said, "Sir, with all due respect to you as my commander-in-chief, get us the hell out of this goddamn war." And President Johnson then said, "Well, son, how do you expect me to do that?" And my dad said, "It's simple, sir, just win it."
Olds was someone to constantly challenge authority, and he was not afraid of speaking his mind. He did so. The growing of the mustache when he was in Vietnam, it was a violation of regs, but it worked. It was a morale booster. His pilots identify this. If their CO is willing to flout regulations like that, then he must care.
Robin was a maverick, without a doubt. He's sort of the renegade leader that got the job done, but he never really totally obeyed the rules. He was always pushing at the rules. Pilots loved my dad. Pilots still love my dad. It seems to me that his reputation is growing, and I love how he is inspiring people now around the world. Pilots write to me from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Korea, wherever they're stationed. And their squadron rooms, they have pictures of Robin Olds up now.
Robin Olds was an enigma. He was the bravest man I ever encountered. He was one of a kind. He was a movie star in real life, and he proved it again and again. It wasn't just for 2 hours on the celluloid. That was Robin Olds.